So I want to welcome Calvin Ayre. He is the legendary entrepreneur behind Bodog and the Ayre Group. Welcome, Calvin.
Happy to be here.
So just talking about Bitcoin SV, the most important question, in my opinion, is, its use case. So to me, why is Bitcoin SV so much more technologically superior than the bigger names like BTC and Ethereum?
Right. Well, let's start with a really, really quick history. I don't want to go into all the mudslinging and stuff that's gone on, but Bitcoin was created in 2006 to 2008 by Dr. Craig Wright, and he launched it. After that, he started working for me in 2010. He was a network security guy because he'd spent all his money putting his data center in his cow shed in Australia. He was one of the first miners of the Bitcoin protocol. And he was working for me. I'd heard of him, but I've never met the guy. And then in 2015, Stephen Matthews, who at the time was the person that hired Craig and had worked with Craig since 2006, and he'd had lots of discussions with Craig about Bitcoin when Craig was inventing the platform, and read copies of the white paper in mid-2008 that had Craig's name on it before Craig decided to launch it under the Satoshi Nakamoto name. Anyways, in 2015, Craig and Stefan had a conversation, and Craig had wound himself up in a bunch of companies in Australia, and was concerned with where the technology was going because people he'd handed it off to were taking it in a direction which would neuter a lot of the powers that he'd put into the original protocol design. So we had a meeting on my penthouse deck over a bottle of wine in June 2015, and we came up with a plan to save Bitcoin. And we supported BTC, trying to block people from changing the protocol. When that was unsuccessful and BTC forked off to the SegWit version of it, that's what BTC is now, the SegWit protocol. We went with the BCH people because they were talking like they wanted to save the protocol. Then we found out that they were actually not being exactly truthful and that they had their own ideas of what they wanted. So we then saved the original protocol as Bitcoin SV. And of course, each time we had to change the trading ticker symbol because the exchanges allowed the forked protocols to use the old trading ticker. And that's what's created the confusion that people think BTC is the original protocol when in fact it's only the original trading ticker. So that's the basic history of how we got here. And all other platforms that are copying or got inspiration off the original protocol have decided that they're going to improve it. And all of them have not understood what made Bitcoin special originally, which was the SPV scaling superpowers, which was in the original white paper, but people ignored it. And in fact, in BTC's case and BCH, they disabled pieces of it, making it not even work. So what Craig did is after he got involved with the Enchain group, Enchain actually put a patent out on a piece of it, which is open source on BSV. And that's the scaling superpower. And without the ability to scale, you are not a direct competitor of BSV. BSV's target is to change the way data is managed and valued. And right now, because of the scaling abilities of BSV, patent protected, then there's no competitor. So Bitcoin, now BSV, has a global monopoly as a public blockchain, being able to do enterprise level data management and valuation. All the rest of them are at best hobby platforms where you could prototype something. But as soon as you're proven it to be successful, you either stop or you go through the extent of porting it over to BSV, because BSV is the only one today that can handle it. And most likely the only one forever that'll handle it, because we will be so far ahead with the way things are looking right now. And even if somebody in one of the other platforms decided that they wanted to scale, they don't know how to do it. And the model roadmap for it would be to follow BSV, but they can't because they would have to license the technology from Enchain. So right. Scaling solves all problems, and the only people that scale, the only platform that scales is BSV.
Right. So I think that's just like such an important point. The only platform that scales is BSV. So just so investors know, right, why would that matter to a big company like Walmart or Home Depot? What would be the fundamental value to them for using the BSV network?
Well, it depends on what their data problem is, but one of the problems that this platform is really good at is breaking up silos. So using legacy technology, you have a lot of different data silos, and the data in different parts of the organization is really expensive to find ways, and they're always klutzy, where you connect this data silo over to this one. And BSV is very good at breaking that all apart, because you can take all those data silos and you can put them all on BSV, and now they can talk to each other. It's up to you to write the rules on how this data communicates with each other. And not only can it communicate between all the different data silos inside your own organization, but because it's a public blockchain, but with the data able to be secured, should you choose to secure it. But if all other enterprises are using it for the same reason, now the ability to actually have some bit of data communicate with a bit of data in another company, should you choose to, also becomes quite easy. And it's very exciting, because Enchain, and I think there's others as well in the BSV ecosystem, but Enchain is the one that I talk to as a shareholder the most. And I know that they've got a platform coming out shortly, over the next 8 weeks, let's say, that's going to sit on top of BSV, and it's going to be modular and allow companies with enterprise data problems to come in and say, here's the problem. And Enchain will say, okay, well, we got this piece, and this piece, and we'll plug these together, and here's your solution. And so that's going to be exciting once that's launched, because that's going to make it easy for enterprises to use this technology.
Right. So right now the supply chains for these huge companies are klutzy, and they cost a lot of money to track. But you're saying now that it won't be as disjointed, and it'll just be streamlined and really efficient to track.
There's another company that I invested in that's actually doing supply chain management with BSV, Unisat. They're using their own system. They built it themselves. They're not using Enchain modules, but essentially it's the same thing. So they've kind of got their own platform, you could say.
Right. So I definitely want to talk about some of the companies kind of surrounding the ecosystem, because some of them are investable right now. But yeah, so obviously it has fundamental value. It's a very, very, very valuable network if you look in the future. So what's it gonna take to drive some awareness to the platform and make it really grow?
Yeah, I think because of how much misinformation there is out there, it's been slow going in educating people, but that's the negative side. The good side is because the story is so crazily powerful, once you actually do understand it, it's a one-way street. You can't unlearn the fact that this technology has a global monopoly in its data management powers for a public blockchain. Once you get that, you can't unlearn it. So a number of people that get that is slowly growing. So that's good. But what's really going to break it out is going to be when mainstream media understands that, and then they start talking about it properly, because they're all confused by the token prices about these non-scaling tokens. All these tokens in these exchanges are all the same. They all can't do anything. So the difference in price is only what they're manipulated up on, as I can understand. But once you get the mainstream media covering the sector properly, which I think is going to happen this year, and what'll drive that is these irrefutable markers that are going to roll out this year. Some of it will be related to some of the lawsuits that are coming, that are going to have decisions that I believe are going to change the narrative. But we don't need to even rely on that. I think the main thing that's going to really change the narrative is when companies roll out use cases and actually prove that they've got this really being done on this platform. And I think that's going to drive the transaction volume through the roof. That's going to make it irrefutable, the way that the amount of scaling that's potential that's here, and the value. I mean, you're going to see that the transaction cost doesn't go up when it starts scaling and stuff. It's just going to be a real eye opener to everybody. And I think that there's going to be a little bit of a panic set in on a lot of people when that happens.
Right, and that's what I love about your Twitter. You'll see something trying to be built on the Ethereum network, and you'll say, oh, just another company trying to, maybe unsuccessfully build some sort of scaling solution on a expensive and clumsy network. But you're saying eventually these companies will realize, they have to realize that something like that isn't as good.
Well, there's a company launching this week. I think they're going in private beta for just people involved. The company's name is Fabrique. It's not one in my portfolio, but I know them very well, and I certainly am a big fan of theirs. They're managing their entire exchange on BSV rails, and they're gonna trade everything. So they're gonna be a normal exchange, but they're also going to be able to wrap and scale all other platforms on BSV. So they'll be able to scale. So you're talking about a scaling solution for Ethereum or BTC. Well, they'll have it when they come out, but it'll all be being scaled on BSV. The scaling solution sidechain for all other platforms is BSV.
So eventually, people will come around, because if they want to save money on costs, the Bitcoin SV network is the place to be, right? And we're talking like companies haven't already found the Bitcoin SV network, but they have. There's lots of companies that are already building on it, right?
Hundreds.
Yeah. Okay, hundreds, exactly. And that's organic growth, right? It's not just companies that have been invested in by kind of like your group, right? There's real organic growth.
Well, yeah, if you go to my Ayre Group website and look at my portfolio, there's, I don't know, 12 or 15 companies in there. I haven't even counted it recently. Well, those are all the companies I've invested in. You go to bitcoinassociation.net, I think, website, and I think there's a link through to a page that has all the companies in the ecosystem, and there's like over 400 there. So I'm just investing in a little tiny corner of the ones that I think I find interesting.
Right.
But the ecosystem's got its own legs now, and it's going to take off. And I think where it's really going to get exciting is once enterprise solutions start getting rolled out, where big companies that are going to use this just to solve a data problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's real good fundamental value here. But another really exciting piece of this is kind of, like you said, the licensing and nChain's patent fortress over this technology. So nChain, does it have the most blockchain patents in the world?
They did at one point, but there's a lot of big companies that have come out and had that holy crap moment and realized that they needed to try and lock up some IP in this space. But the quality of those patents is really there. What nChain's got is they've got the most solid foundational portfolio in the industry, like base patents on public blockchain use. And what's kind of bizarre in my mind, in how it's being undervalued, is that this patent portfolio that they've got actually, let's just assume that one of these other blockchains actually figured out how to scale without having to license nChain's scaling IP, which I don't think is possible. But let's just assume they did that. The first thing that they're going to find when they do that is that if they try and build things on top of their scaling public blockchain now, that they're going to be running into nChain's patent portfolio.
Right.
And some of that stuff nChain is offering out open source on BSV. Some of it they'll keep for commercialization. But when you look at that, it really makes you shake your head at the crazy valuations that's happening, and which is why I say there's no the speculative exchanges are meaningless. That's all manipulated. They mean nothing.
Right. But that's just truly earth-shattering what you're talking about, because you're saying that if companies try to build on like other networks, they're going to have to pay a licensing fee to nChain because they own the patents on the technology.
Patents that apply to any public blockchain. Yes.
Right. Whereas Bitcoin SV, if you want to build a Bitcoin SV, you don't have to pay that licensing fee, right?
In some cases, it depends what it is. Yeah. Okay. But all the sort of main things that are necessary for the BSV ecosystem to sort of move ahead, a lot of that's been released open source.
Okay.
But there are some things that they've kept for commercialization, but they certainly aren't patenting their inventions with an intent of holding back the BSV blockchain. And ironically, people that are in these supporting some of these other chains have been calling nChain a patent troll, which is impossible because nChain is actually inventing its technology and patenting it.
Right.
And actually registering the white papers even before they file their patents on the BSV blockchain. So they've got a timestamp of when they've invented all these things. So it's beyond any doubt that nChain's the one that's inventing all this stuff. But you know, they're the ones that are going to be deciding whether they release it free on open source on this platform or not. And other people they're going to have bottlenecks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just so incredibly huge. So what is the time frame do you see for kind of when Enchain will make the decision to start potentially collecting license fees?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that they're not going to be aggressive because they don't need to be aggressive, because by not scaling, all these other platforms have already stopped themselves from being competitors with BSV and what Enchain's doing. So I don't see that they're going to use their IP in any way to block others, because it's not necessary, because these other platforms will all block themselves by not scaling. So that's over. I see what's going to happen is that enterprises are going to come. They're going to come to Enchain. They're going to have a problem. They're going to look for a solution. Enchain will say, well, here's the package. Well, we'll give you all these modules, and here's the license fee for your solution.
Right.
That's how it works in the real world.
Yeah,
Enchain didn't invent that process. That's how everybody else does it.
exactly. So that's why I'm excited by it, because it's the most valuable network in the blockchain space, and it's protected by the strongest patent portfolio in the space. So just
Correct.
totally mind-blowingly valuable. So then my question for you is kind of like, how do investors take advantage of this, right? So you can buy the token, you can buy, or whatever you want to call it. You can buy Bitcoin SV, or you can buy the kind of the companies surrounding it, like TAAL, which I really want to talk about.
Anybody can find an exchange and buy the token. Myself, I'm not in that space, so I actually don't give any token advice, because that's not my game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, right now, it is actually hard to invest in the startups, because in the space, which is my space as a venture capitalist, I'm funding companies in this space. The one exception is TAAL. And TAAL is a public company. It's on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and it's in discussions with the Toronto Stock Exchange. So I hope that at some point here, I'm an investor. I'm one of the early investors in the company. They've got, they're world leaders in their space of writing massive blocks. They're the world record holder. The last like 2 or 3 world records have been all blocks mined by TAAL. So they're world leaders in writing massive blocks to a public blockchain, and that blockchain being the only one that scales and accepts massive blocks. And they've got a lot of other things. You go to their website, taal.com, which is TAAL, and they can explain better than I can what their business plans are. But the main thing that they're doing that's really exciting in here and now is their ability to scale and write massive blocks. And that's going to open up all these enterprise opportunities. But from a public company perspective, I think they're the only pure play in the BSV space right now on a public market in the world. There's going to be more, but right now that's the only one that I know of.
And how does it?
And I'm all in.
Okay, good. Yeah. No, I wanted to open that up a little bit. So how do you compare TAAL to Enchain? Because they both are providing enterprise-wide solutions over BSV,
Yeah,
right?
they're symbiotic. They absolutely, the chairman of Enchain and the chairman and CEO of TAAL are the same guy, and they've carved up the space. I mean, there's a chance at some point in the future they might even merge. They're that friendly with each other. But right now they've Enchain is enterprise business solutions and IP creation. So they've got an engineering department that will solve and with software modules, their platform that they're rolling out, and that's their enterprise solutions department. And then they've got their research team that's creating all this IP and filing patents on it as they invent it. That's what they do. And TAAL has its own IP. They've licensed Enchain, so they've got a license on all Enchain stuff. But they've also filed some of their own patents, and they're doing some. They're the world leaders in infrastructure and building out the infrastructure to be able to be writing these massive blocks. And they're going to get into data management and a bunch of stuff. But the two don't overlap. They're perfectly synergistic. BSV couldn't operate properly without at least one company in the space doing what both of these companies do. Right now, Enchain actually doesn't really have an obvious competitor, so but they're private, so you can't really take a play on them right now in the public markets. TAAL has competitors, but they're not. TAAL's the world leader, and you can take a position in TAAL because it's a publicly traded company.
Right. So that's amazing. So for TAAL, obviously they have an incredible IP, incredible solutions for enterprises, but they also mine Bitcoin SV, and that's kind of a question I have. Is their valuation linked to the price of Bitcoin SV? And if it is, like, what are you kind of expecting to happen to the price of Bitcoin SV if it does relate to the TAAL's valuation?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I would hope that the people that are investing into OWL are smart enough to be looking at the big picture of what happens when the network takes over the whole world, and
Right.
not be valuing to OWL based on what I consider to be a market manipulated and significantly manipulated down market value. So I think BSV is massively undervalued anyways. And so, yeah, I think neither of them are well, I should be careful here. BSV, I don't think is valued correctly. I think it's been it's been negatively marketed by people who are threatened by it. TAAL, I think anybody smart that's buying TAAL stock should be looking at the big picture of where the technology is going to go, and how big the data set that TAAL is going to be managing is going to be in the future. That's where I would think I would focus.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Yeah, so don't worry about the pricing fluctuations of BSV as much as just like the incredible opportunities for this network long term.
Yeah, the market opportunity.
Excellent. And I have to ask you, as kind of like one of my last questions. So regulation, this is a brand new industry, very early stages. Just thinking like of the whole cryptocurrency space, regulators, do you think they'll clamp down? What do you think they will end up doing to this?
Yeah, for sure, they are already. I mean, the regulation is coming, and it's going to be applied in various speeds globally. All existing laws apply to all technologies. This whole concept that code is law and that you can't stop this stuff, that's all nonsense. And we're seeing that happening right now. And we're going to see a lot of people going to jail for stupid stuff that they've already done. And that's just the way it's going to be. So the regulators are going to put their stamp on this thing. The BSV ecosystem has actually anticipated this. It's ready for it. So I don't see that as an issue. The entire crypto space could be outlawed globally, and the BSV platform would still have a reason to exist because it's data management stuff. Doesn't have to be tied to what's happening in the crypto space. So I'm not worried at all. I don't think that even the crypto stuff has any real worries about getting stomped on to the extent that it won't exist anymore. But a lot of practices that people have gotten accustomed to that are in violation of existing securities and other laws are going to become harder and harder to do without ending up in trouble. So I think that you're going to see all new industries go through. This is the second time I've gone through it. I was there in the Wild West days of the sports betting industry. And it's very similar to what's going on here. And eventually the regulators get their hands around things. And, the people that survive are the ones that are able to anticipate when the regulation is going to be serious and are prepared for it.
Yeah, that's what I love about this time, because it reminds me of the tech bubble days of the early 2000s when there were all these crappy companies. They came up, but only the ones that had incredible value survived, right?
That's another example of the exact same thing. The Wild West days. Yeah, all new industries go through it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you could see do you see kind of a correction where Bitcoin, maybe BTC, maybe makes a dive because there is a kind of.
I don't see a correction unless the regulators put their fingers on the scale and actually start smacking people that are in the BTC space. Yeah. I think with the way that they have got things set up right now, and with the way that hedge funds are using stable coins and whatnot, and how that's affecting the BTC price, I think BTC will stay up for a long time. I don't really see it crashing. I actually hope it does stay up. I don't wish anything bad on anybody. I don't consider any of that to be a competitor for what BSV does. BSV is a data management and valuation platform and has a global monopoly. I would prefer that people in that space would stop all the attacks on, Craig and myself and this technology, and just sort of stay over there and do their own thing, and let us focus on the data management stuff that we're focused on, and they can't even do anyway. So yeah, I'm happy for them.
Okay, clear this up. Great. So, wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much. You answered a lot of our questions. So What's going on with you and what is happening? I know you're a big part of CoinGeek and there's a big conference coming up. So can you talk a little bit about that so people can
Yeah, I'm actually the founder of CoinGeek. So that's that's one of my brands. It's a media site. We are the only site that focuses exclusively on the data management and valuation ecosystem of BSV. That is what we cover. And so if you want to find out about it, you will get actual information there. None of the other crypto sites understand this space. And in fact, they are threatened by it. So they are publishing misinformation constantly. So that's a site where we cover the news, what's happening in this ecosystem, fact-based coverage. We also have a conference series. We've produced conferences that are educating people and bringing the ecosystem together. And we've produced them in Seoul, Hong Kong, London a few times, New York. And the next one's in June, and it'll be in Zurich, Switzerland. So we'll have some live, but the pandemic may interfere with that. But the last few that we've done, we've also been live streaming them. So you can watch it live on as well. So you go to coingeek.com and then click on the conference link and you can find out about it. And that's my focus. I'm focused on educating people about the data management powers of this technology, the data management and valuation power.
Excellent. So where can people go to learn more from you about this?
There's a bunch of places. For technical information, you go to bitcoinsv.io. For more business stuff, you go to bitcoinsv.com. For stuff about the ecosystem, and all three of these sites have a lot of resources. You can go to the bitcoinassociation.net site. That's the Swiss registered association that helps coordinate the ecosystem. And for just general news about what's going on, the only website that covers it is mine, which is coingeek.com, and news and conference series, which I stream online. So we pump out a lot of content, and it keeps anybody that wants to be up to date on what's going on in our space, and that's the place to be.
This discussion is for informational purposes only. Nothing in this discussion should be taken as investment advice. Guests are not compensated for their appearance. Do not base any investment decisions on the information presented.